Imagine the total destruction of a future dynasty, the catastrophic end of a king's destiny, and the permanent stain of innocent blood on a man's hands, all averted by a single conversation. Have you ever considered that the biggest crises in history weren't solved by massive armies or political power, but by the quiet courage of an unexpected person? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the Bible's most overlooked heroines, a woman whose name you might forget, but whose action saved a king and preserved a sacred lineage. Her name is Abigail, and her secret isn't just about ancient history. It's about why God specifically places the wisest people in the most toxic and dangerous situations. Get ready to discover how she prevented a massacre, saved David from himself, and why her life holds the blueprint for solving conflict in our own polarized world. Forget everything you think you know about those sweet, silent wives in the Bible. The woman we're talking about, Abigail, was a powerhouse, but she was trapped. She was stunning, yes, but her real power was her mind, a grace and inner authority that made everyone listen. The Bible calls her sensible, but that word is too weak. Abigail had future vision. She was one of the only people who looked at the dirty runaway David and instantly recognized him as God's next king. Think of her as a grandmaster who could see 10 moves ahead in a game most people couldn't even start. This brilliant woman, this spiritual titan, was married to the absolute worst man imaginable, Nabal. He was ridiculously rich, a millionaire rancher controlling thousands of animals. But while his bank account was massive, his soul was utterly empty. His name isn't just a label, it literally means fool in Hebrew, and he was the perfect example of it. He was a notorious bully, cruel, stingy, and harsh, a massive ego that had become a national problem. The irony is sickening. True divine wisdom was stuck in a hellish marriage with pure human stupidity. Imagine the daily stress living with a wealthy tyrant whose explosive temper was unpredictable. Why would God allow his most strategic person to be trapped with his most destructive fool? Because that suffocating pressure cooker, that toxic marriage was the boot camp that hardened Abigail into the fearless weapon required for the crisis. Her silent struggles weren't wasted time. They were the tough, vital training for the day she would ride out alone against an army and save the life of a king. Every moment she dealt with Nabal's meanness was a practice drill for the moment when the future of the entire Holy Line would depend solely on her courage. The spark that lit the fuse wasn't just a refusal. It was a brutal, calculated assassination of David's character. For months, David's 600 hardened warriors had served as the unseen, unpaid shield, protecting Nabal's staggering fortune, thousands of sheep and goats from every bandit and predator lurking in the Judean wilderness. When the annual shearing feast arrived, a time when generosity was law, David sent a respectful delegation requesting only a portion of the bounty they'd helped secure. Nabal's reply was an act of war. He didn't merely say no. He venomously declared David a runaway slave, the ultimate career-destroying insult hurled at the man Samuel had anointed to be the future king of Israel. The effect on David was instantaneous, absolute, and terrifying. The king-in-waiting, the man after God's own heart, was consumed by a raw, white-hot fury. All spiritual reasoning evaporated. The insult had pierced his honor, and honor demanded blood. He screamed the command that sealed Nabal's fate. Gird on every man his sword. 400 men, the elite of his loyal followers, instantly became an unstoppable targeted army of vengeance. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming for total indiscriminate slaughter. David swore an irreversible oath by the morning light. Not a single male belonging to Nabal would draw another breath. At that very moment, a young anonymous servant, shaking with the knowledge of certain doom, risked his own life and sprinted across the fields. He burst into the presence of Abigail, gasping out the unspeakable reality. "Mistress, the master's foolishness has summoned death. David is coming, and he swore to wipe us all from the face of the earth. The countdown to massacre had begun. The only person who could possibly stand against 400 blades against the blind rage of a future king was the solitary trapped woman who now held the collective fate of her entire household and Israel's destiny in her hands. The air in Nabal's estate was instantly poisoned by panic. Outside, David and his 400 vengeful men were covering ground rapidly, their blades glinting under the harsh sun, their minds fixed on utter destruction. Inside, Nabal was oblivious drunk and singing praises to his own wealth, completely deaf to the sounds of impending doom. The fate of his entire dynasty hinged on the terrified whispers of a single servant and the sharp mind of his wife. This was Abigail's moment of destiny. She didn't waste a single precious second demanding obedience from Nabal. She knew the fool was useless. She moved with the speed and precision of a military general, her years of quiet observation culminating in an instant, flawless counter-strategy. She didn't offer scraps. She ordered a royal ransom. She instructed her servants to bypass her husband's authority, gather a massive, humbling tribute: 200 loaves of bread, 2 full skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, bushels of parched grain, and hundreds of fig and raisin cakes, an inventory that screamed, "We recognize your royalty." This was an act of espionage and treason against her own lord, done entirely to save him. But the gifts were only the first step. The true act of heroism followed. While the feast was rushed ahead, Abigail herself mounted her donkey and set off completely alone, unarmed, and facing the equivalent of a fully weaponized special forces unit led by a man consumed by righteous fury. She knew she was riding directly into the path of death. This wasn't bravery. It was a desperate, calculated gamble that her wisdom and humility could disarm a future king whose mind was locked on an irreversible oath. She was literally positioning her own body as the only fragile human barrier between David's sacred future and the catastrophic, irreversible sin of wholesale murder. Every step of her donkey was a step closer to either saving a nation or dying in vain. The sight was terrifying. David, covered in dust, his eyes burning with vengeance, stopped dead in his tracks. Before him was a caravan of life-saving food, and immediately after, a lone woman throwing herself face down in the dirt. Abigail wasted no time. She didn't stand and debate. She prostrated herself before David, taking on the ultimate guilt. "On me, my lord, on me, let the iniquity be." She essentially told David, "Don't stain your divine calling with the blood of a fool. Stain your hands with my supposed crime instead." This was the highest form of humility and strategic deflection. Then came the true masterstroke. She didn't just apologize. She played the role of a prophet. She reminded David that Nabal truly deserved death, but she also reminded David who he was: God's anointed warrior, the man destined to be king. She spoke of his future: "When the Lord has done for my Lord, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, you shall have no cause of grief, that you have shed blood without cause." She wasn't just begging for mercy. She was presenting David with a choice between legacy and regret. She forced him to see the future consequences of his present blinding rage. In that desert heat, surrounded by 400 silent armed men, David's fury broke. The weight of his oath dissolved under the sheer force of Abigail's wisdom. He realized he was seconds away from committing an unforgivable sin that would have haunted his entire reign. David praised God and declared, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me, and blessed be your discernment, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from shedding blood." Abigail didn't just save her house. She saved David's soul and his destiny. The sun rose on Nabal's estate, but the shadow of death still lingered. Abigail, the crisis manager, had done her part, but the ultimate authority still had to speak. She returned home and found Nabal still completely obliterated by alcohol, lost in the self-congratulatory fog of his own feast, still deaf to the fact that his wife had literally purchased his life with her courage. Abigail, demonstrating her continued wisdom, waited. She let the night pass, knowing that confronting a drunk tyrant was pointless. She waited until Nabal was stone-cold sober the next morning, when his mind, such as it was, could finally process the full weight of the cosmic disaster he had unleashed. Then she told him everything. She detailed the venomous insult the sight of David's 400 marching swords and her own daring, treasonous intervention. The effect was horrifying. The Bible records a chilling moment of divine justice. Nabal's heart died within him, and he became as a stone. This was not just a metaphor. It was a sudden, devastating physical blow, likely a cerebral hemorrhage or massive heart attack, triggered by the sheer crushing terror of realizing he had faced down the future king and lost everything. The fool's life was taken by God himself. 10 days later, Nabal was dead. God had issued the ultimate non-negotiable sentence. When David heard the news, he didn't gloat. He rejoiced, but not in Nabal's death. He praised God fiercely, declaring, "Blessed be the Lord, who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept his servant from wrongdoing." David saw the hand of divine intervention, and he immediately saw the reward for the woman who had saved his soul. He recognized that Abigail was not just intelligent. She possessed a royal spirit. He instantly sent messengers to ask her to be his wife. Her answer was an immediate, powerful affirmation of her destiny. She went from being the slave of the wickedest fool in Judah to the bride of the anointed king of Israel, a profound, beautiful, and complete reversal of fortune, proving that courage, wisdom, and patience never go unrewarded. Abigail's dramatic desert ride is far more than just ancient history about a king and his future wife. It's a timeless blueprint for navigating the intense, chaotic conflicts we face today. What can we living in our modern, polarized world actually take from her desperate intervention? The first lesson is the unmatched power of strategic humility. When she threw herself at David's feet, she didn't try to argue or defend her foolish husband. She immediately absorbed the guilt, declaring, "On me, my Lord, on me, let the iniquity be." This immediate acceptance of responsibility, even when it wasn't strictly hers, was the ultimate disarmer. It instantly shocked David out of his vengeful mindset and opened the door for rational dialogue. Secondly, Abigail mastered the art of focusing on the future legacy. Her message was deeply profound. She didn't just tell David, "Stop." She told him to remember who he was meant to be. She shifted his focus from the temporary, fleeting satisfaction of immediate vengeance to the permanent, ugly stain it would leave on his royal name and his divine covenant. Whenever you face temptation or blinding rage, remember to ask yourself, does this split-second decision serve my ultimate destiny, or just my immediate raging ego? Finally, her life proves that wisdom outweighs wealth and authority. Nabal had all the titles, all the money, and all the power. Yet he was destroyed by his own idiocy. Abigail had none of the official authority, but her razor-sharp discernment saved everyone. True influence in this life isn't measured by your job title or your bank account balance. It is found only in your ability to speak the right life-saving word at the critical, explosive moment. Now that we've walked through the fire with Abigail, it's time to reveal the profound secret hinted at from the start. Abigail didn't just save David. She saved the entire trajectory of salvation history. David's life as the anointed king was precious, but his lineage was sacred. The promised Redeemer Jesus Christ was prophesied to be born from David's line. If David had followed through on his oath and committed wholesale murder that night, he would have stained his destiny, potentially jeopardized his kingship, and threatened the purity of the messianic line. Abigail's wisdom was the divine safety mechanism placed strategically in the household of Nabal, preventing David from committing a sin so profound it could have changed the course of history. This story isn't just about Abigail's past, it's about your present role. The world desperately needs modern-day Abigail's people who refuse to be drawn into the destructive rage and polarization of our time. We need men and women of strategic wisdom who can stand between an insult and an annihilation, between a hasty decision and a lifetime of regret. I want you to reflect deeply on this question as you face your next conflict. Are you acting like the reckless, reactionary Nabal? Or are you acting with the life-saving courage and future-focused wisdom of Abigail? Choose wisely, because your next decision might not just save your reputation. It might save a destiny.